Hey, it's Danny from projectmanaverse.com, and in this video, I'm going to share 5 common defect management mistakes. So let's jump in. First of all, let's talk about defect management. What is it? As you go through your project, you're obviously going to be building some kind of product. So software upgrade or brand new software. You do lots of coding, you get it built. And before you put it out to market and give it to your customers, you've got to test it thoroughly. You want to test it to make sure there's nothing wrong with the software. That's what we call defects. You want to make sure all your requirements have been delivered. And you also want to make sure that you've designed it correctly and you've designed it in a good, efficient way that works in conjunction with all your business processes. So that's why we do testing. And it's really important that we establish really good defect management as we go through that testing period, because the testing period is usually the most intense phase of the project, because there's a lot of unknowns there. You don't know how many defects you're going to get. You don't know how hard they are to be. You don't know how hard it is to resolve them. So your timelines can often extend out. Whenever there's an extension of project phases, it's usually the testing period that keeps going back and back and back. So it's really important that we have good defect management, because defect management or good defect management will allow you to complete your testing on time, which is always on the critical path to going live. So you can ultimately get your product out there and go live on time to the date you said you were going to, and you can have a big success. So defect management is really important. So what I'm going to do is talk about 5 common mistakes when it comes to defect management. Number one is the incorrect classification of the defects. And specifically, I'm talking about the severity of the defects. So when you have a defect, you need to assign a severity to it. So how severe is this defect? Is it really catastrophic? Is it going to take down the entire system and no one can log in? Or is it pretty important? We don't have a workaround in place, but we can't do our key critical processes because this defect is blocking us? Or is it not as important? It's a bit annoying, but we can work around it with a clever way? Or is it just like cosmetic and it just doesn't look right, but it's not actually stopping us from doing anything? It just doesn't look very good. So you need to classify your defects with severity. Severity 1 is always a top one. Now, what will often happen is your customers that you're building the product for out in the business, they will be involved in the testing. And if they see something wrong, they want it to get fixed. So they might classify it as a Sev 2 when it's really a Sev 3, or a Sev 3 when it's really a Sev 4, because they want to focus on when they want to get it fixed. So they'll exaggerate how important or how severe the issue is. But when you do that and you've got all these Sev 2s, it becomes very hard to prioritize which ones you should be working on first. So obviously you want to fix the most critical ones first. But if everything is being raised as a critical, important thing, then you're just spreading your resources trying to get everything fixed, and you're not really clear on what you should be doing first. And you may be wasting time on fixing things that aren't that important and not spending time on fixing things that are very important. So make sure you're strict with the business people, and you set expectations in terms of a very clear criteria in terms of what's a Sev 1, what's a Sev 2, what's a Sev 3, and what's a Sev 4. That way, there's no ambiguity about it. There's a clear criteria and they can't exaggerate things. That's number one. Number two is that valuable time is lost between handoffs. Valuable time is lost between handoffs. This is a massive one, because time is critical in the testing phase, as I alluded to earlier. Minutes count. I'm serious, minutes count. And what you don't want to be in a position is where you're just wasting time because people weren't getting the communication that they had to do something. Often when you're resolving defects, there's quite a few people involved. There's a lot of coordination. You have to, first of all, triage a defect with the right people to understand, is it really a defect? Then you need someone to investigate it further and recreate the defect. Then you've got to assign it to an engineer. They might need help from another engineer and they have come back. So basically, there's always like steps to getting it fixed. And you need someone to coordinate that and make sure that every time it's someone else's turn to do something, to get their opinion or do their little bit, they know about it as quickly as possible. I've seen cases where there's really important defects and an engineer has started to fix it and they have a question that's blocking them that the business can answer very quickly, and they'll tag the business person in the defect and say, oh, can you just let me know what this is? And then a whole day goes by before they've even answered. So you've lost a day, precious time, when they could have just answered straight away. Engineer got their answer and now they can carry on fixing it. So you don't want to lose that valuable time, and it always happens. So you really need someone to be all over the coordination of it. You can get people to do it themselves to an extent. You can set expectations and be very strict on your management, guys. Just make sure if you're tagging someone, just ping them first. Make sure you're getting a response. You can do that kind of stuff, but it really does need someone to coordinate it and just track everything all throughout the day and make sure the handoffs are being completed. And that's where you need a test manager really to do that for you. These days, it's a bit harder to get test managers on your project for various reasons, but you either have to do it yourself or get someone else to do it if you really want to nail this and make sure your defect management is as effective as possible. That's number two. Number three is resource allocation is not balanced. And what I mean by that is you've got various people to help you fix these defects, usually engineers, because they'll have to put the code right. And you'll have a finite amount of these resources, but sometimes they're just not balanced correctly. So one resource will have too many defects assigned to them, and they obviously can't get through them all. And some other engineers will only have a few, and they're twiddling their thumbs a little bit. So it's very important for the defect manager or the test manager or you as a project manager to just every day take a step back and look at your resources and see how much work they have on and make sure you're allocating the work correctly. And you'll have to do that every day and rejuggle things and keep doing that. But it has to be done. Otherwise, you're not being efficient with your resources or your time. And you'll find that you'll have, it's like the 80-20 rule. You have a pool of engineers fixing things, and 20% of them are just brilliant. They can fix anything. They get through the fixes very quickly, and then the rest won't be quite as good. So you need to make sure you're balancing stuff and giving them the right ones that they can really provide the most value in the most efficient way for, as opposed to giving like a really difficult one to a less inexperienced engineer who's just going to be struggling for weeks on ends when the other chap could have done it in a day. So you just need to balance all that and take that all into account. That was number three. Number four is not enough evidence or detail is given when the defect is raised. So when someone raises a defect, they're doing their testing and they think, right, this test has failed. I can't do it because of this defect. They need to raise that defect and put evidence of what's happening, like screenshots is really good, a really clear description of the steps they took to get to that point to create that defect or that issue. Sometimes a person will raise a defect with just a couple of lines of description. That's not enough for the business people or your team or the engineers to recreate that defect and get it themselves so they can now work on it. So you have to go back to them and say, can I have a bit more evidence and description, please? And you're just wasting time. So right at the start, in the ways of working and establishing how things are going to be run in this phase of the project, you need to be clear on what evidence is required as a minimum in order for you to respond to these defects quickly and not have to go back to the person and ask for more information. Okay, number five is the issues are not triaged before they're raised as defects. This is a problem because because sometimes defects are raised when they're not actually defects. That just wastes time. It wastes everyone's time that you don't have, the same minutes count in the testing phase. So what you want to do before you actually officially raise a defect on the system is you want to triage that issue with some people. Triage is a word that's used in medicine and it was used in war for medical reasons when they have injuries on the battlefield and they think, right, which person do we basically save first? They look at everyone's conditions and they think about, right, which is the most critical. But this is basically just establishing, is the issue really a defect, or is it just a education piece, or are they just not following the process right? Sometimes you just need to say, right, well, actually you didn't do the process right. You have to do A, B, C, D, but you did A, B, D, C. So it's something like that. So you just need to make sure that it's a true defect before it's raised. And that's usually done in a triage meeting. So have a daily triage session where anyone that has any new issues can come along to that. They can bring it and they can say, guys, look, I'm doing this. It doesn't seem right. Is this a defect, or am I just not doing the process correctly? That was number five. Okay, that's the video. I hope you find it useful. And if you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this one, hit the subscribe button. And until tomorrow, please take care.